I got a haircut. Looks more put together now, finally. Um, Hello, friends. This week was really great, actually. I've gotten into a really great cadence in taking these free one on one calls, and I'm building a kind of cohort, doing market research, things like that. And it brought up so much for me and in me, speaking to all these people, um, listening to the struggles that they have and the obstacles that they're trying to overcome, and seeing so much of myself in them, so much of my journey in their journey. And I wanted to talk a little bit today about being special and the trap of trying to be special, because I think in society today, just about the worst thing that we can be, by traditional standards and metrics, is a nobody, right? Nobody wants to be a nobody. Everybody wants to be a somebody, or at the very least, wants to at least be themselves. I started off when I was younger not knowing at all who I was. Um, I mean, my name is not even Grisha. When I was born, it was Gregory. And in my language of Russian and Azerbaijani, the name Gregory means Grigori, which means Grisha. And when I was about 14, 15 years old, I started reading a lot of psychology and philosophy and self-actualization. And the reason my Instagram and all of my socials are "Who is Grisha?" is because that's the question that I ask myself, right? What kind of man do I want to be? What are the morals, values, ethics, the thoughts I want to have, the thoughts I don't want to have, the kind of son, brother, husband I want to be? And I tattooed it on my face, but mirror flipped. So every time I look in the mirror, it's a reminder to be that person. And ever since I was a little kid, I always wanted to be special. I always wanted to be a somebody. I was my mom and my dad's golden boy, and I really sucked at school. I was horrible in school. I loved learning, but I just hated the education system. I was always tinkering with technology. I was building computers at a young age and all of that stuff. And the pressure of constantly living up to being a somebody or being special is exhausting. And what I realized was, as I was growing up, as I became more and more certain of the person I was and participated in the intentional creation of the identity that I made, I kind of recognized that it was just another mask that I was wearing. And anytime you're wearing a mask, you feel like there's a part of you that is hidden. And it's ironic that we have so much conversation and discourse these days about personal brands and personal branding, because so many people believe that they have to bear their entire soul and identity on social media and be vulnerable and authentic. And it's certainly a good practice, but in the calls that I had with everybody, there's so many people that are scared to be truly themselves, not just online, but in their life in general, because of the attachments that they've created to friendships that no longer serve them, or family judgments and expectations, and this idea that anything that they do or anything that they pursue has to result in them becoming somebody, right? Or being a somebody. And for me, the place that I'm in right now, I found so much freedom in being a nobody. I grew my Instagram, to 28,000 followers, and it became a prison, because it became this sort of expectation of having to uphold, this pretty aesthetic feed and all of these things. And at one point, I just decided that it's not aligned with who I am. It was blocking me. It was stopping me from being able to really continue to create. And now I'm much more a fan of just turning on a camera and yapping and just talking and allowing that to come from my heart, my soul, my intuition, whatever it is that you want to call it, because I'm not concerned with how it is going to be received, right? I journal on this app called Rosebud. It's really, really great. It's an AI journaling app. Not sponsored yet, but it basically reflected something back to me today that I really loved, because it was this concept of how in being authentically and truly yourself, you essentially allow yourself to become a magnet to those that are truly meant for you, right? And so the issue is that a lot of people spend so much time thinking about the brand that they want to have and you know, all of these things, when they can't really take the first initial step, which is to even embody who they are currently. And they try to skip that step. And it's something that also is really popular in the spiritual community, is, you know, identifying with just a soul and a spirit and this, you know, extra dimensional being, and bypassing the very real existence that we have on this planet, for whatever time that we do have it. And it's like, I always say there's this thing of like, you know, being is the like natural essence of spirituality, is simply just being, right? But we are human beings, so you can't bypass being a human and go straight to just being, right? It's a transcendence that you have to pass through. It's not a, you know, just something you can throw a hat on and all of a sudden, you know, embody. It's not a destination, it's more something you return back to. And you have to return back to it by letting go of all the things that you are not, right? My process of being where I am and being who I am, it eventually became so much more of a journey of letting go of people and connections and things and that were holding me back, rather than adding, you know, putting all this extra identity traits and habits and building routines and all of this stuff. And the simplicity became something that I craved so much. The simplicity of routine. I go to bed 9 p.m., 9:30 every day, wake up 7 a.m. every day. I can't tell you when the last time I had a drink was. You know, Monday push day, Wednesday pull day, Friday legs, Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday running, Saturday mobility every week. And to, you know, to some people, of course, that's boring, but there's a certain freedom that's available in the, you know, rigidity of having the routine and the schedule. And the reason that I say these things is because for so long I wanted this life. You know, like I would see these people that were just like always motivated and waking up early and, you know, getting to the gym, and it was part of their identity. And I was always like, why can't I do it? Like, why do I struggle so much to stick to something? And it wasn't because I needed to add on extra things, right? I didn't need to add on a routine. I didn't need to download another app. I didn't need to watch another video. I just had to get rid of and remove all the distractions and diversions from the things that really mattered to me. And then I had to figure out what really mattered to me. And then from there, I essentially had to put all my focus into doing that. And, you know, there was this period where if I had nothing to do, I would just do nothing. And I think that that's something that is really so transformational, is the ability to just do nothing, because you catch yourself. You know, you catch yourself when you're gonna backslide into habits that don't serve you anymore, or into, you know, versions of you or versions of your identity or personality that are not necessarily aligned with those initial important values that you discovered for yourself. And so all of this sort of brings up the question of, you know, who are you at your core? You know, when you go on the intentional journey of creating your identity and crafting your identity and being intentional about who you are and who you are not, there's this like identity gap that exists, right? Where it's like you're not fully the person that you once were, but you also are not fully stepping into this new version of yourself. And so the question naturally arises, are you the old version of you, or are you the new version of you? And the truth is you're neither, right? What you are ultimately is the awareness of both sides of yourself. And there's this story that I always share with people called the Ship of Theseus. It's a metaphysical experiment where, there was this boat that would travel from, I think, Greece or something like that, for over 1,000 years. It would go from, one port to the next port every year, taking this journey. And for 1,000 years, the wood would get rotten, the ropes would kind of get burnt to their edges, the crew would pass away, and a new crew would come on board, and they would have to replace the planks and the sails and all of this stuff. And the question is if you take all the old pieces, the old crew, the old wood, the old ropes, and you put it back together again, which is the ship of Theseus? Is it the new one with all replaced parts, or is it the old one with all of the original parts? And the reality is that the ship of Theseus was never the wood. It was never the crew. It was never the sails. It was never the rope. The ship of Theseus was a story. The ship of Theseus was the narrative that was the ship of Theseus. And that's ultimately what you are, is the awareness of the narrative that you have about yourself. And when you begin to look at yourself and your life through that lens, you start to realize that, your identity is not black and white. Your identity is not something that you can even really try to fully comprehend or grasp, right? It unlocks this critical skill, which is existing in a state of ambiguity and uncertainty. And the reason that that's so important, right, is because you have to figure out a way in life. And when people ask me about my beliefs and my thoughts, I say I have firm beliefs held loosely, or I have loose beliefs held firmly. And the reason that that's so important is because you have to be rigid enough where you stand for something and you have a pillar or values or an identity, but you can never be so rigid that you cannot allow yourself to bend, or if there is bending, you'll snap, right? And it's just this careful balance, and being able to hold paradox and being able to hold contradiction is so important, right? Being able to be an individual that is simultaneously getting better, while at the same time, kind of slacks and doom scrolls sometimes, right? It's this like really interesting perspective. I forget originally where I heard it, but when we're happy and things are going good in our life, we don't define our entire existence as this giant ray of sunshine where everything is going amazing. But when we're sad, for some reason, we define our entire existence as sadness and miserable, and everything is always like this. And it seems like sadness is the baseline that we return to, whereas happiness is the occasional spike and the occasional peak that we get to reach, and then we end up going back down to that sadness baseline. And the reason that I heard that this is true is because the sadness comes from within, and the happiness comes from without and external, right? And so the danger is having that kind of external mechanism where our happiness is based on external metrics, external relationships, external success, external values, and the sadness is rooted in our internal shame, our internal beliefs, our internal subconscious programming, our internal understanding and perception of what it means to be who we are as individuals. The good thing is that you are on this journey going to find that you are eventually going to develop a switch, right? Where you will see that the same sadness that exists within you and the same sadness that exists as the, baseline for your existence also has another side to the same coin, right? The journey is about then becoming intentional about rewiring what that baseline actually looks like, right? And finding a internal struggle, an internal battle, a internal quest, I guess we can say, that's worth fighting for. And getting rid of as much distraction from that internal quest as possible to allow yourself to actually make progress in it. And you'll find that over time, the internal quest, and I'm speaking from experience that this is where I am now, the internal quest becomes much more important than any external metric. I don't care about how many views this gets. I don't care, how many people comment on it or even how many people see it, right? My internal quest is about showing up on this camera and simply learning to speak my ideas and learning to vocalize the things that I believe in. And when that internal metric becomes more important to you than the external ones, the baseline then simply becomes, I recorded today and I showed up. And there's a part of me and a part of my intuition that always knew that I would end up here. And if there's one piece of advice that I can give you, it's to never lose whatever North Star exists in your mind for what it is you are trying to achieve or become or be. That super idealized version of yourself that exists in your head, it's very, very much achievable, and it's very, very much possible. It literally just depends on what it is you're willing to sacrifice. And one of the things that I said to one of the clients on the meeting today is anything that you have to give up in the pursuit of the authentic expression of your internal intuition is never something you lose. It's only something you sacrifice. It's the price that we all have to pay for the courageous act of truly being ourselves. So consider it a life tax. That's it for today. Have a great day.